Now, though, I can't believe this has taken so... Mind you, I can believe this has taken so long. Get the cladding off. The London Fire Brigade Commissioner has pleaded. Andy Rowe said these high-rises still had Grenfell-style cladding and serious deficiencies 7 years after the fatal fire. I remember that morning because I was going to the BBC, where I was working at the time, early in the morning to do an early breakfast show. And I live in West London, so I'd just seen on the wires that there was a fire. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I was going in, I think, 2 or 3. And I said to my driver, I said, we might see the fire. Oh, my goodness, because I go down the A40. So there it was. I have never seen anything as harrowing as that, and I have been a war correspondent. But I think because it was in it was in London, right? It just looked so disastrous. It was so shocking. And it was absolutely ablaze from ground to ceiling at that point. It was absolutely ablaze. Of course, that was the story. And when I got into work and I got on air, people were phoning me from the scene. People who were wanting to run back in were calling me. It was extraordinary. It was something that never should have happened in this country, in this day and age. And the fact that there are still thousands, nearly 9,000, they think, properties, 6,000 to 9,000 properties, still got this cladding in this country and still at risk of that sort of fire is unbelievable. So the recommendation, of course, is the fact that this has got to go. But there is a problem because no one wants to pay for it. The leaseholders don't want to pay for it. The freeholders don't want to pay for it. And those that put it on don't want to pay for it either. So this is what's dragging it out. 7 years so far, people have been living with this cladding. And they can't sell their properties either. I remember when I was selling my house, there was a couple, a lovely couple, came to see me. And they said, we want to move out of our flat. And I thought, oh, lovely. They loved the house and everything. They said, this is perfect for us. And as they left, the estate agent said, they're not serious buyers. And I said, why not? And he said, because they've got a cladding problem. So nobody wants to buy their flat. So this is a problem now for a lot of people who are stuck with this deadly cladding. Well, Liam Spencer joins me now, who's a lawyer and End Our Cladding Scandal campaigner. Liam, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Hopefully I've done credit to what the situation is at the moment, but where do you stand on it?
Yes, thank you for having me. I think you gave a very good overview of the issues. I mean, broadly, there are 3 sources of problems. They all boil down to money, as you said. Number 1 is developers and building owners are fighting each other over who should pay, even though developers are supposed to be taking the lead in fixing their past mistakes. The second issue is the government fund, the Building Safety Fund, is very slow at disbursing funds. And the third issue is that there just aren't enough bodies to put on these projects. There's a very limited capacity to actually remediate these buildings. So I rather fear it's going to be something that lives with us for considerable time.
What are people who are living in these buildings doing? Are they having to pay extra insurance? Are they even able to get insurance? Are they having to have fire wardens? What is happening?
All of the above. I mean, the insurers have massively increased rates for affected buildings. In some cases, the worst cases, you need multiple insurers to club together to write the insurance for affected buildings because no single insurer will take the risk. And some buildings still have these 24-hour waking watchers, although you can get rid of them if you can get the money together to put an upgraded alarm system in. So it just resulting in enormous bills that are being picked up by the people who are least responsible, which is the people living in these buildings.
And am I right in saying that there's only a recommendation for flats above 11 metres? I mean, how does that work as well? Because presumably those flats below 11 metres, even they will have the same cladding. Does that mean that they have to pay anyway? If you live in one of the lower flats, you're never going to get any help.
Well, since the Building Safety Act was passed in 2022, buildings above 11 metres and particularly buildings above 18 metres have been subject to a different regime because they're supposed to be higher risk. But you're quite right, you can find buildings below 11 metres with all sorts of problems. We had a fire in I think it was North London on some low-level houses that had got this a flammable cladding attached to the exterior. So buildings of any height can be affected, but the focus of the regulatory response has been on buildings 11 metres and above.
Also, I remember at the time, Liam, that there was also talk about hotels and hospitals or schools or other places using this form of external cladding for damp problems and issues like that. Not that it works for that, but are they still around? Or has the government at least sorted that out?
Well, I mean, one of the key gaps in the response is nobody actually knows how many buildings are out there of any type.
That's shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a real travesty that there is no central register, there is no guiding hand that's prioritising the remediation of the highest risk buildings. Whether that will change, there's a new regulator called the Building Safety Regulator that's supposed to go out and gather this information, but it unfortunately seems that the approach has been cart before horse. And again, the costs of all this extra regulation will fall onto leaseholders. So the response has left a lot to be desired.
But that means, of course, that we could all be heading off to a hotel and not realise that it has got this cladding on the front of it or around the back of it, and we don't know what dangers we might be in.
It's a possibility you can't rule out. I mean, what you'd hope is responsible operators and responsible owners have already tried to identify the risk and address it, but there's no way to be sure. There's no central check.
And what about leaseholders? We've heard a lot from the Levelling Up Minister, Michael Gove, about changing the laws on leaseholds so that they do have more control over their own properties. I mean, the idea that you have a landlord when you've bought your property seems to be very archaic to me. But are we going to see changes to leasehold laws?
Well, there is a bill that's working its way through Parliament. It's about to start its passage through the House of Lords that tries to improve the lot of leaseholders, and that's very welcome. As you say, you can get these third-party investors who take a tiny stake in these buildings, 2%, make all the decisions and simply don't care about what happens. I think the building safety crisis has laid all of that bare. Whether the bill that's going through Parliament goes far enough, even though it does make welcome changes, is a controversial question. If you ask me, it doesn't go far enough because it doesn't ban the leasehold system outright, except for houses. So these buildings will continue to be created, and it does nothing to regulate the people who hold leaseholders' money and make all the decisions, which is managing agents. So that's another key gap.
With the leasehold, are they going to change the leasehold? You say for houses there, but most houses are sold on a freehold basis. What about houses that are divided into flats? Are they at least going to say, look, it's 50-50, or you get a third each, and that's it? No need for a leasehold or a freehold.
No. That's exactly the problem. Is for any building containing more than one set of premises. So even converted houses, they will continue to be sold as leasehold, and you run the risk of the freeholder, so the owner of the external walls and the land the building's sitting on, being different from the people who actually pick up the bills, which is leaseholders. That's the conflict of interest that's at the the heart of this system. That will continue. The bill doesn't do anything about that.
I mean, that is so archaic, in my view. It really is. And look, as far as Grenfell is concerned, and I know that you're not a Grenfell expert as such, but you know, a lot of people, we drive past this building every day. It's still where it is. We were promised that it would be dealt with nicely and things would happen, but it's still there as an aching reminder of that dreadful fire. Has it become symbolic in some way to you guys as again, you know, for this, you know, trying to get rid of cladding on other buildings?
I think symbolic is the good word. I think it's a tombstone that stands out on the landscape, and as you say, it's a very prominent landmark. You can see it from the major road, and it dominates that part of the skyline, and it is a symbol of what has gone wrong and what has not yet been fixed.
What advice would you give to somebody who's living in a property at the moment that has this kind of cladding on it, who bought their property before any of this was known, and now can't sell it? What would you be saying to them? Hang on in there, we'll get it sorted, or cut your losses?
Eventually there will be a solution. How long it takes, it's probably a period measured in years is anybody's guess. But I think my advice to anybody who's caught in this situation is keep pressing the issue. Keep pressing the issue, write to your local newspaper, write to your MP, write to your councillor, make sure the issue is visible. If you're in one of these buildings that's built by a developer that's still in business, which is about 40% of the total roughly, write to the chief executive, write to the chairman of the board, make sure your building is on the radar.
And who in your view should pay for this?
Ultimately, this is a failure brought about by poor regulation or non-existent regulation and defective materials and defective construction. So the bulk of the cost should fall on developers, product manufacturers, and those who fail to regulate, which unfortunately means a big bill for the taxpayer.
But of course, we know this from Grenfell, from the inquiry, that nobody wanted to take any responsibility. The manufacturers didn't, the builders didn't, the council didn't. You know, the fact that this was cheaper than it should have been, nobody raised an eyebrow. Nobody has been fired for this. Nobody seems to have lost much out of this, apart from those that lived there.
Well, exactly, and it remains to be seen whether there'll be any criminal charges brought against the people responsible for what went on at Grenfell. That's all been put on hold pending the outcome of the Grenfell inquiry, which the final report's expected, I believe, later this year or very early next year. So we'll see whether there's any criminal accountability. There has been some civil litigation around Grenfell itself, but I think you're quite right. I think most of the people involved have created this enormous problem and got off largely scot-free.
Yeah, they usually do, don't they? You know what? This inquiry will have cost more than it would have taken to correct all these buildings as well. That is another outrageous thing. Liam, good to talk to you. Liam Spender, their lawyer and End Our Cladding Scandal campaigner. Thank you very much indeed for that. Right, I'm going to take a quick break and then we're off for some entertainment news.
See it, hear it, think it. Talk Radio and Talk TV.